Hey everyone, welcome to another track guide, this week for Okayama International Full Circuit in the Formula V. As per usual, I've left the racing line on for those of you that use it, just so you can get some reference points. And let's get going. So, track's a bit longer this week, so there should be a bit more to go through than Lime Rock, but it covers the same basic driving aspects, but use them a little differently around this circuit to Lime Rock, just because of the nature of the circuit. So, turn 1, as per usual, track usage, just get all the way out to the left hand side. I don't actually brake very hard for T1. I like to downshift straight away into third, and it makes the car a little bit floaty, but it just means the car turns in really nicely. So you'll see here I do quite a sharp jab on the brakes, but then very quickly I'm back off, trailing a bit of brake just to keep that weight transfer on the nose, get the front in. And you'll see here actually the car turns in quite aggressively, and you just sort of balance it on entry, and then you can already start feathering the throttle in to pick it up. You'll notice if you've watched some of my previous videos, I talk about how I use the brake off the corners to actually keep the front pulling. With this car, a lot of the time, if you just mash full throttle, the front will sort of wash out to the edge of the track. So you'll notice on the exit of this corner, I pick up the throttle quite hard, because you want to carry as much speed out of this corner as possible. But you'll notice I just tap the brake a few percent out of the corner here, just because I'm starting to wash out to the edge of the track and I know I'm not going to be able to keep it quite on. This doesn't really kill any speed just because you're on full throttle, so the amount of drive the car's got versus how much you're slowing it down by tapping the brake is very minimal, but it just seems to help the nose pull in that bit tighter, and also blending the throttle a little bit on the exit. Make sure you try and use as much of the track on the exit as you can. You don't need to get quite out as far as this. It doesn't really make much difference. This just happened to be where I ended up on this particular lap. You can actually come off a bit later and a little bit less wide, but you should be getting out to this red and white curbing. Bring it as much to the right as you can without scrubbing speed, so you don't need to get all the way out to this white line because it's really easy to touch the grass and go straight on. Just make sure you get most of the way back across the track, open up this next corner. You definitely don't want to brake for this corner, it's just a case of a little lift. Again, you can see that I actually do that sort of little percentage of braking, but I wouldn't really class that as a brake. It's just to get the weight on the front and pull the nose in. And notice through the corner, I just always on the throttle and just sort of modulating the two to adjust how much the car's rotating. If you haven't watched my previous videos with this car, it's a case of the less throttle you have on, the more the car will turn. It can take a tighter angle. That's just because the way the diff's set up. The moment you pick up the throttle and the diff ramping changes, it's a case of it won't turn as tight, so we'll start to understeer. You can see here, the moment I whack full throttle, the car actually straightens up a lot. Make sure you get right over the curb on the left here, just making the track that bit easier on the exit. You're not going to run into the gravel, so you can get on the power a lot earlier. And these strips of green on the edge of the track on a lot of the exit curbs, you can use those. The car doesn't bottom out or anything, it just gives you that extra sort of couple of feet of track to use. Flat out all the way down to this next corner, again just cutting distance, so you can cut across the inside here. These are really minor gains, cut across the curb there. Just keeping the car as straight as possible through that whole section, not scrubbing any speed. This is one of the tracks I do use reference points for. I've talked about previously that I don't really use reference points just because with this car you can sort of, especially when you're doing all the slipstreaming, I think you can get a bit lost with it. But on this track they're quite convenient. So the 50 meter boards where I brake for this corner, nice and hard, and then again off early, and you can already start to pick the throttle back up, just blending the brake a little bit to adjust how tight the car's going, and full throttle. This corner is really important to keep it tight the whole way round, and then as you get onto the straight, then you can start to open it up. But if you start opening the corner up at this point, you're just making the track longer, and you might have a little bit more top speed at the end of the straight, but you're actually going to be slower over the lap. So keep it nice and tight with this curb, and then when you get to about this point, a little bit tighter than the racing line shows you, you can start to open it up. You can cut tighter, you can open it up a bit earlier. It doesn't really matter. It's a case of if you cut tight early, you'll be quicker for the first half of the straight, and if you go a bit wider, because it'll build that speed up, you'll be quicker for the second half. In terms of lap time, as long as you're not opening it up any earlier than sort of this point here, it doesn't really make a difference. It's just what part of the straight you're quickest on. I like to keep it tight just because it's easier to follow that. If you run into the middle of the track, you can get a bit lost with where you are on the circuit. Obviously, flat out down the straight, shift at 130 into fourth gear, kph that is. Every track you should always shift at 130. It's just the best point in the rev range for this car. It's not a massive difference, but it helps a little bit. So like we talked about with reference points, again this corner 50-meter board, which actually is pretty spot on with where the racing line tells you to brake. Nice and hard. I go straight down to third the moment I hit the brake pedal. It can make the car a little bit floaty, but I find it helps just slow the car down, and just helps get the nose in. So nice and hard on the brakes, and again as we turn in, roll off. Once you get to the apex here, this is where you can start to pick up the throttle. It's really important with this corner that you actually get at the very least to the white line. If anything, you want to be a bit over the curb. If you miss it, it actually ends up costing you a lot of time because there just doesn't seem to be as much grip the moment you miss the line. So as long as you get sort of about this point, you can take a little bit more curb, you can take a little bit less. As long as you're down around the white line, you're all good. Full throttle, you can get on it nice and hard here because you're actually carrying a decent amount of speed for this car already. Let the car run out, just so you build that speed. Bring it back to the right. Again, you don't need to get all the way to the right hand side of the track. It's just a case of getting most of the way there. Now, this corner you actually want to cut a lot, so you turn in a lot earlier than you think you should. Lift off the throttle just to get the nose in. And you'll see here we actually cut onto the grass a little bit. This isn't a 1X. The sim lets you do it, so try and cut over here as much as you can. It doesn't make a massive difference, but every little helps around this track, and it's also, if you turn later, it's actually quite hard sometimes to make the apex, whereas the earlier you turn, the more consistent you can be. So just try and cut this as much as you can. You don't need to cut it quite this much. As long as you're sort of up over the curb and just nibbling the grass, you're absolutely fine. This is quite extreme. You actually see it upsets the car a little bit, but because we've cut the corner that bit, we can get on the throttle earlier. And again, on the exit, you can actually run into the gravel a little bit. Probably don't want to be quite this much, but as long as the centre line of the car doesn't go over this edge of the green, you're all good. Make sure you use this this sort of cut through for the other layout and get out on this curbing. Just opens up this next corner. So you'll see we're actually turning in a little bit off the grass, but again, Iracing doesn't mind you doing that. So make sure you're all the way out over this curb. Just open up this corner. Turn in. Again, not really braking for this. I do that sort of couple of percent little tap on the brakes, as I've done in some previous corners, just to help the nose pull in. But again, straight off, and then we're just blending the throttle the whole way. Get on it quite hard. Make sure you get, again, like the previous corner, up on the grass or most of the curb. And then all the way out, use this, make sure you use this green strip. You can carry an extra few Ks, which, especially if you're racing someone, gives you a real good advantage down into this next corner. This is probably the easiest overtaking spot on the track in terms of if you're in a pack. Obviously, there's other easy points like the end of the main straight, but that's quite a common place for people to defend. So into here is a good surprise one if you've got a good run out of that last corner because you've used the runoff, and just poke out the inside as you hit the brakes here. That's normally a pretty easy and decisive move. So again, this corner, I don't shift to fourth up this straight. It's just more hassle than it's worth. It's no faster, and it's just an extra thing to do when you get to this corner. So stay in third, hard on the brakes, and with these corners, it's just a case of making sure you're on the right line. Around these corners, you're going so slowly, it's a case of you just want to make the track as short as possible. So make sure you get right in up against the white line here. You don't actually want to use the curb. It just seems to upset the car a little bit, especially if you've gone in quite hard. So you can nibble it a little bit, but don't be up on the grass. Get a nice drive out, and then a lot of people try and swing the car all the way out to the left. Don't do that. Just keep it to the middle of the road. Again, making the track shorter. And by swinging it out here, you don't make this next corner any faster. All you do is kill speed in between these two corners and make the track longer for yourself. It's like the previous one. Just make sure you get as close to the white line as possible. I've actually missed where I wanted to be a little bit there by a wheel width or so, but it doesn't really cost you a lot of lap time. And then pick up the throttle nice and hard all the way out, and again use all this exit curbing because any speed you can carry out of that corner will carry all the way down to the last corner. Again, hold third through this section. I don't shift to fourth, more hassle than it's worth for the last corner. Use the track limits all the way out to the white line. Turn in nice and smoothly. If you jab the brake like we've done in some previous corners, it will upset the car here, so you'll notice I'm really gentle with how I apply the brake. Nice and smooth, not very much. And then we're just blending the pedals to balance the car out. You can cut this a little bit more than I've done here. You can clip the grass a little bit. I wouldn't say it's ideal. Really, you want to be just over the inside of the curb. But anywhere up on the curbing is normally fine. And then it's just a case of picking up the throttle as early as you can, all the way out to the white line, over into the exit runoff. And again, like we talked talked about earlier, you can actually use a bit of a grass slash gravel, as long as the centre line of the car doesn't go over this strip here where the AstroTurf ends. It's not a 1x, so maybe not quite this much, but if you've picked up the throttle and you're going to commit to it, it's quicker just to dip 2 wheels in the gravel. It doesn't slow the car down at all, and then you can just get a nice run to the line. Make sure you shift up to fourth way before the line. Don't try and hold third because it's just going to kill the speed. But yeah, I'll show a replay now of the full lap, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Cheers.